and welcome to Two Profs in a Pod. We're so excited to be back. COVID-19 put us on a temporary hiatus, but we are here. We want everyone to know that we're okay, we're restarting, and looking forward to sharing more podcasts with our listeners. This episode focuses on mindfulness. It was recorded pre-COVID-19, but we feel like it is definitely relevant to the world we are living in today. Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoy. Hello, and welcome to Two Profs in a Pod. I'm Tanisha.
I'm Beth.
And we are faculty developers and professors at Glendale Community College in Arizona. And today we have a special guest with us today to talk about mindfulness. Our first guest, one of three that we're going to introduce, is Dr. Fernando Romero, psychology professor at GCC. Hi, Fernando.
Hi, Tanisha.
Fernando has his doctorate degree and was awarded by the Learning Program in the Division of Psychology and Education at Arizona State University. His 20 years of teaching experience includes teaching in K-12 environments as well as in higher education institutions. He's been faculty at GCC since 2005, where he teaches positive psychology, human development, cultural psychology, and introduction to psychology. He occasionally consults and provides training for organizations that are interested in integrating mindfulness, meditation, and positive psychology principles for personal and professional development. Welcome to Two Profs in a Pod.
Thank you.
All right.
And we have Dana Jiang, who told us that she lived in a temple for 10 years and was a Buddhist nun for 5 years. So she's coming to mindfulness from a really interesting perspective. And she also started a program at Lesley University in mindfulness studies, which she believes at the time was the first and maybe only master's program in mindfulness studies. Currently, she works at GCC in the Center for Learning, supervising some employees there, and she's taking some English classes and music classes, and she helps run the mindfulness space here at GCC. Hi, Dana.
Hi.
And our third guest is Deborah Rozic, and she is administrative support for chemistry and physical sciences. And she actually got her start here on campus because she wanted to carve out time over the summer for mindfulness with Dana. So over the summer, they got together and did some meditation mindful practice. She has worked with many students because she previously worked in enrollment. And one of the things that she learned from her work in enrollment and also in meditation and now mindfulness is learning more patience and compassionate connections with students and people and also the self. Thank you for being here, all three of you. We are going to jump into
why we're talking about this.
So, Beth, could you tell us why, like honestly, real talk, why we're talking about this today?
We're talking about this because Tanisha and I, we've done 2 episodes on burnout. That's how popular that topic was.
Yeah.
And after the second episode, Fernando actually reached out by email. And the way, I don't know if Tanisha interpreted it the same way, but the way I interpreted it was like, okay, Fernando thinks he needs to talk to us now about mindfulness after hearing our burnout episode. That's probably not what he intended. But anyway, so of course, it's an interesting topic and relevant and timely and important. So, of course, we said, yes, that would be awesome.
Yes.
And I think also GCC is doing something interesting with it that probably other campuses are not currently doing and maybe would want to.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like a natural follow-up to your episode.
Oh,
or maybe we should have done it first and then we wouldn't have needed burnout. We wouldn't have needed the burnout episode.
No.
Yeah, very true.
Life doesn't work that way.
So let's have a little bit about what research says about mindfulness and maybe a definition of mindfulness.
So a common definition of mindfulness is the moment-to-moment awareness without judgment that you use. And that's something that you can apply anywhere. You can eat mindfully, you can drive mindfully, you can have a conversation with mindfulness. And meditation is more the practice that you can do that is more of a ritual over a longer period of time that involves kind of like a different level of attention. Mindfulness is more target focused around one issue at a time, monotasking, whereas meditation is, it may involve paying attention to your breath, bringing your attention to your body, sometimes even navigating your emotional world. And at points, you may actually create gaps between your thoughts. So sometimes people think about meditation as emptying your mind, which is kind of impossible to do. Mm-hmm. And that's why sometimes people feel they're failing at meditation. But in reality, meditation is just a conscious way to monitor your awareness over an extended period of time. So you can think of meditation as kind of like the gym that you can practice so that you're fit on the moment-to-moment basis. So that would be kind of like a way to distinguish mindfulness from meditation.
Mm. Anything to add, Dana?
I think the thing I want to add for mindfulness is that, the way I learn it is there's four foundations of mindfulness. So mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of the feeling, mindfulness of the mind, and then mindfulness of the phenomena. So most of the time when we're doing mindfulness here is really the mindfulness of the body. And so you use your breath as an object, and that is part of your body.
Mm.
And some people have argued that mindfulness is actually an incorrect term, that it should be heartfulness, because in a way it's more about bringing your emotional, non-cognitive resources onto the present, because sometimes we just get too much into our heads. Mm-hmm. That's not necessarily what we want. We want to bring the whole person to every situation, and that's what gives you integrity.
Yeah, and the Pali word for mindfulness is called sati. So I also have this memory and recollection, right? Mm-hmm. So that's why part of the mindfulness is keep on going back to your anchor point, mm-hmm. whatever you set out the object of your meditation is, and that in return trains all the focus and concentration.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So what does research say?
So the research says that when we are mindful, we are training our prefrontal cortex. Very specific regions. One of the main ones is called the ACC, the anterior cingulate cortex. And it's kind of like the area of the brain that allows you to integrate all of the different domains, the emotional domain with the cognitive domain. And oftentimes we are pretty unidimensional. So let's say, for example, if we're having an argument with someone, we want to be right, and we forget what really matters, right? Mm-hmm. So the ACC is the part that allows you to integrate both the cognitive and the non-cognitive, allowing you to kind of like integrate the bottom up and the top down processes. So it's a completely different way of interacting, communicating, thinking about the world. And by doing this, you can impact stress reduction. You're less likely to ruminate. So rumination is when the mind goes on and on and on. Mm-hmm. So let's say, for example, you had a conflict, and then you're driving in your car, and then you're like, oh my God, that could have been a perfect comeback line. Mm. I almost want to drive back and tell that person that. So that's rumination, like that obsessive loop of thoughts that go on and on, like inner dialogue. So with mindfulness, you actually begin to quiet that mind that sometimes can take over. There's some research that points that we actually spend about 50% of our awake time ruminating, just being mindless. And so we may fail to take advantage of the things that are there in front of us. Also, increasing in working memory and focus. You reduce your emotional reactivity. A lot of the times we overreact to things, or we feel that we're victims and that we live a life where we're just putting out fires left and right. In this way, you actually begin to notice how you may actually be bringing some of that drama into your life, and you can learn to embrace the challenges of everyday life, from commuting to difficult coworkers to spouses and children. And overall, this facilitates well-being. So many people talk about happiness, but unfortunately, when people hear happiness, there's a tendency to focus too much on positive emotion alone. It has to be a deeper sense of happiness where you actually integrate achievement, meaning, relatedness, and also transcendence. So those are the different factors that actually compose well-being.
Yeah, and mindfulness really work with the amygdala.
Amygdala.
Yeah, amygdala. So, that's the emotional part of the brain. So, the research has also shown for people who meditate, regularly, that part of the brain is more thick. So they're less reactive and more responsive. And I like the quote by Viktor Frankl is, between stimulus and response, there's a space. And that's what meditation does. It helps you to cultivate that space so you're not like just being very reactive when you hear anything, see anything. You're able to, take a breath and then, then respond.
I love that idea because it's about creating gaps. Sometimes we just go from one thing to the other, to the other, to the other, drive-through kind of mentality. But creating the gaps allows you to like really breathe and reflect and take the bigger picture.
And as you meditate regularly, you will also be able to just like immediately before you even speak, like any of your thoughts, you're constantly mindful of the thoughts that are in your mind.
Right.
So you're not like the minute, let's say you sense you being a little impatient, you pick up on it right away. So you could, realign yourself to say the right thing.
I'm going to jump ahead to a question, because one of the things that Tanisha and I were talking about before you all got here was just the work ethic in the U.S., which is, and I fall right into this. It's like I go to work and I'm a worker and, I'm doing my work. And then when I go home, I can live life. This sounds horrible, actually, when I hear myself saying it. And it's not that I'm consciously thinking of that every day, but I think I'm not alone in thinking that. So I'm kind of curious about how you sort of merge practicing this mindfulness in a space where we've been conditioned to think, you're supposed to be productive right now and producing, and yet mindfulness seems like
It's counterproductive.
yes,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah, so that's a very utilitarian and individualistic approach to work. About 80% of the world is actually collectivistic. So in the United States is one of the most individualistic nations in the world. So that mindset actually permeates in the workspace here.
Absolutely.
And something that one way that you can begin to integrate this is that not everything about the way Americans work is bad, because we happen to be some of the most productive workers there are. But sometimes we pay a price for that productivity. And one of the ways that I've heard people describe integrating mindfulness and meditation into the workplace is that you don't have to create that separation. You don't have to say, I'm going to stop being a human being when I go to work.
Right.
That you actually can use your work as part of your practice. Does that make sense? Because if you're communicating better with your coworkers, you're practicing mindfulness, and you also are going to help your companies or your institution's bottom line. So it's not something that is going to be exclusive or challenge those specific outcomes. On the contrary, it can make you a much more satisfied worker, a happier person, someone who communicates. So, like, to give you an example, I think that oftentimes in the workplace, we fail to see the talents in people because we stare at them. So we don't really see what people could bring into the company or the organization because we already judge who they are and what they can do. But with mindfulness, you can step back and really listen and really watch. And then you could actually allow a person to be who they are and provide those contributions to the organization.
Mm-hmm. And when we were talking about it earlier, I have a different perspective. I see it's a blend of both, that it doesn't have to be either or. It could be and both. Mm-hmm. I have that perspective now, but I was a lot like Beth as well. Like you work and you do the grind and you do the work, and I will worry about being mindful and meditating later, as opposed to finding little moments where it can actually be a natural part of my work cycle. Like one way is just active listening, right? Just being present when people are talking to you, no matter what the topic is about, is one way you can practice mindfulness in the workplace. And it can help you to be a better team member, a better employee, even more productive just from the simple act of being present for other people. So it doesn't happen. And I think that's a good point that you brought up. And, because other people, I'm sure, have the other mindset is, work is work. And that's what I do. And this is a time and a place and space for it. But there are opportunities throughout your day where it doesn't have to be this separate thing, just embedded as a part of your work cycle.
Yeah. So, that's absolutely, because what you're trained on the cushion is what you're supposed to practice 24/7. It's not just about when you sit there to meditate, you're practicing mindfulness.
Right.
So it's to really integrate all times to go back to your breath and focus. And you will realize that when you do that, your productivity actually goes up. It doesn't go down, because a lot of time when you're so busy, you're actually kind of wired. So even though you seem like you're doing a lot of work, but you might not be that productive. So to have, for instance, when we do our daily meditation, I notice that my productivity actually goes up after I meditate, because I have that space and, to just clear my mind. And then it's thoughts and ideas, come about, after that. And so I see it as more productivity. But I know that to a large audience, most people would think, you just sit there doing nothing. But, once I listened to this guy was saying, think about, we brush our teeth for our dental hygiene. And meditation is really a mental hygiene. Mm-hmm. Give yourself a couple minutes to, just unwind.
Right.
I think for myself, it's because I'm so much more aware of myself and my space, to find points of collaboration. I'm a foster champion on campus. So those are people that work with students that are aging out of the foster care system and entering college. So it's a collaborative group of people all across campus. And I think finding those points of collaboration and how we can work together to do really incredible things came from me out of my meditation, that I sought out those kinds of collaborative efforts to sort of integrate how I work, what I do, and how can we bring other people into it.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And another thing Tanisha and I were talking about that you looked up was an article you looked at the National Institute of Health website that actually talked about mindfulness at work.
It talked about what is mindfulness, relaxation techniques, it talked about yoga, and even provided some resources about, productivity at work. So I'm sure we'll link to it in the show notes.
I'm curious what year that came out too.
I don't know. I tried to see if I could see a last updated date. I didn't see it, but it just talked about some really interesting things that I think our listeners would be really interested in, and it's on the radar of the U.S. Department of Health Services. So I guess that's pretty legit.
Yeah, and actually, Deborah and I are planning on going to the Mindfulness Global Summit in June in LA, and that's exactly they're going to talk about mindfulness in the work leadership and workspace and everything. So you have people from Google and many different presenters will be there.
Yeah, that's awesome.
We're going to have to invite you back for mindfulness part
I know, 2.0.
I'm not joking.
No, seriously.
I'm not joking. Okay, so if you would like to share, we're mixing up our template for our regular listeners. Just so you know, we're mixing it up a little bit today. if you would like to share what your practice in mindfulness has meant for you, maybe we could spend a little bit of time doing that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, obviously I have already spoke a little bit about how much it's developed my ability to have patience and heightened compassion when working with students. But it also throughout my life has helped to get me through a lot of really rough times or troubles. I had a serious critical accident. And one of the things in having a critical traffic accident and then head trauma is to have a lot of unexpected emotional symptoms, right? So a concussion can come along with sporadic memory loss. It can come with a lot of anxiety, insomnia, a lot of emotional baggage that you're not really expecting, along with all the physical healing that you go through. And a lot of people can tend to have those symptoms for a really, really long time because of rumination, of thinking about the same things over and over again, of sort of getting swallowed up by the anxiety, getting swallowed up by these emotions and not getting past them. And for me to use meditation or mindfulness as a center point allowed me to create space to sort of interrupt those cycles, to sort of create a positive outlook, a new positive track for the brain. And there has been some sort of indications that you can actually use meditation to physically do that, to sort of reroute your brain and prevent long-term symptoms from head trauma and concussions. And I think that in addition, you can see the whole experience as a gift when you can take time out, I guess, for review through mindfulness. So it made me also put myself in the place of students that I deal with, veteran students who have undergone head trauma, and look at it as a gift that I can see things from how it looks on their viewpoint. So I think it was a benefit. It helped me in the healing process, but it helped me to look at it a gift, a way to see myself in someone else's shoes.
So, I mean, mindfulness and meditation has always been my passion. So that's why I started, a mindfulness group here at GCC 5 years ago, is to bring that, to the community. For me, mindfulness really helps with concentration, and part of the practice, you naturally develop wisdom. So when you practice a lot of mindfulness, then when you have the wisdom, then you know how to make decisions better in life. And when you go through challenges, you know how to tackle with them. So that is a big part of meditation for me. And also it really just helps me with, especially when I went through my cancer journey with chemo and surgery, and it really helped me to be able to accept things as they are, and also to, like right now, after all the treatments, I really use meditation as a way to reveal my memory, and I definitely feel like, it helps me a lot with that. So I'd like to bring mindfulness to as many people as possible, but I'm also not ever the pushy type. I talk about it. If you're interested, you're welcome, but otherwise,
Right.
Yeah.
So what mindfulness means to me is that I'm a better tennis player. And the reason I mentioned that is that I pretty much accidentally stumbled onto mindfulness because of performance anxiety. So I do have genetic tendencies towards smile anxiety. And after grad school, I always wanted to play tennis competitively. So I would go to tournaments and underperform, and I would be upset. So I started to learn about strategies to become a better tennis player. And then I realized, this is actually deeper than tennis. This is about me being an anxious person. And then I started to see how this allowed me to open up and enjoy other things and take risks and accept that I would always have that anxiety. So I have befriended my anxiety. It's part of my genetic composition. But now, instead of dragging me down, it's actually part of it's part of the fuel and the force that I use to accomplish what I want to accomplish in life. So I teach positive psychology here, and I tell my students, I think I teach this class more for me than for you. because I really believe that Had I known that this existed when I was 19 years old, I could have avoided a lot of mistakes, a lot of detours in life. So I find that obviously in life you're going to have ups and downs, right? But now my downs are not so low, and I don't really need to enhance the highs because even small things can give me a lot of joy.
That is definitely a comment I always hear from people, that the way they view me, they're just like, you're just like, like so even, right? Like, and I don't really have all the ups and downs, and I was thinking there's something wrong with me, right? Because other people, they have so much excitement, and so I always like to be the listener, because I'm always fascinated with their life, it's like so many, things that it could be trip up, them so badly. I'm like, that's not a big deal. I don't understand. Why are you so tripped up?
Yeah.
So
and that's a principle called equanimity, where you actually learn to navigate life in a smoother way, which is kind of like the opposite of bipolar, where you go from chaos to rigidity and back and forth. It's like living a roller coaster life.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to answer that question too, Tanisha? Because I know you have participated.
Yeah. A while ago, I was definitely an active member of the Mindful group. Unfortunately, I stepped away because my schedule just got busy and I didn't make it as much of a priority. But I know when I was in practice, there is this sense of like calmness, this sense of peace, even in the midst of chaos. I think the best way you can describe it is you feel like you're in the eye of a storm. Like, how in the hurricane, there's the eye of a storm, and even in the midst of the chaos, there's this moment of peace. It felt like that when I was in practice with meditation daily for 20 minutes a day and attending the group, there was this sense of, in the midst of the storm and craziness, there is this center point that you can always go to. Also, it kind of helped with management of emotions. It helped with rumination, all types of things. So, and now being out of practice, I can feel the difference. And I've been out of practice for a while. I've been trying to get back into practice with like little 5-minute, 10-minute spurts. But man, what a difference it makes, because I feel like it's not as easy to find my center when there's a lot going on. And there's a lot going on just in general, just with work life, home life in general. So mindfulness is important because it feels like it's very helpful in just centering you in the middle of chaos. And it's nice being able to go to that center point, especially when you need it the most.
And then Dana, do you want to talk just a little bit about our mindfulness space on campus? Is it a space where you have a certain time every day where people can come? Can they come at any time?
Yes, so they could come at any time. We open from 8 to 7, Monday to Thursday. Friday is 8 to 4. And our regular practice is Monday to Thursday from 1:30 to 2. So that is a group meditation together. We can have discussions or questions. And also, it's good to be in a group meditation because sometimes you might just not be in the mood to meditate. But once you go into that group, it holds you there, right? So it's like, I remember once I joined an evening meditation in someone's house, and it was like, we're meditating for 1 hour outside. And I specifically asked, like, oh, are there mosquitoes? And he's like, oh, no. And so I was like meditating, and there was a mosquito with me for an hour, and I couldn't like really move or get up, But so that's the beauty of, the group meditation. It kind of holds you there, and then, you work with whatever is coming up.
Yeah.
I do want to qualify certain things. One is there's a lot of misconceptions about mindfulness and meditation. And then the other thing is you do have to be careful because when you become mindful and when you practice meditation, you really become more objective, you observe better, and you're more open-minded, which could potentially make you vulnerable. So a lot of cold mentality, for example, actually preys on people's goodwill to open up and listen to ideas. So you want to also maintain your critical thinking. And you want to make sure that whatever is being, whatever the goal is for the practice, that it actually does align with your principles, with your ideas, because you actually have to create some boundaries and limitations. So that could be kind of like a dangerous side for being way too open. And also making sure that you actually do understand what these principles mean, and because there's a kind of like a tendency towards corrupting and hijacking a lot of these philosophies and ideas. So you see people at the Grand Canyon doing a yoga pose and being all mindful, posting that on Facebook, but they don't really practice it, and it's just a show. So making sure that is not just a fad or something else that people are doing in a very superficial way. So this is a lot deeper than just...
It's more than just mindfulness, like it's a panacea for all your problems, I think that's what I realized, like when I was doing more research. I'm just like, well, there's the most important part of mindfulness is the practice part. It's not talking, So, I mean, the practice is very simple, but what you gain could be very profound. And also, when you practice meditation, what you feel on the inside is uniquely different from everyone, right? So whenever I meditate, I tend to feel peace and ease. And other people who meditate, some emotional stuff could come up. So those are all normal experiences. It's really a work with yourself and see what's coming up and how you interact with whatever is coming up.
Just to piggyback on the idea that it's not a panacea, you have to also be careful about the limitations. So let's say, for example, you're dealing with a mental health issue, or practicing mindfulness and meditation can help in addition to your therapy. But it should not be perceived as, this is a replacement that I can do by myself. And whatever you do when you're doing it mindfully, it just attains a better quality. But you do have to show up to do work.
Right.
You cannot just be mindful and procrastinate. It's not a replacement for the things that we need to do for ourselves, but it's a really nice complement.
And just to piggyback on that is that when you maintain a routine practice, it helps you with, let's say, depression or bipolar or some of the mental challenges. But at the same time, you're not doing it the minute you're having an episode, then you're trying to meditate, it's not going to work. So you have to keep in mind of that as well.
And then speaking of assumptions, I think another assumption, and I even had this assumption when I first started, because one of the first questions I asked, my question was like, what is the religious connection to mindfulness? And I think that's a common assumption that all mindfulness practice is connected to religion, but that's not true. And I know that's also not the focus of the mindful space either. So could you guys speak on that too?
When you think about mindfulness, you could just think about for your healthy body and mind. Right? Is mindfulness really help you with just being that awareness, and then it help you with developing wisdom so you make better decisions in life, right? Like the anchor point is nothing like you're, nobody's teaching you to recite a mantra or to do a prayer, it could be, you could do a visualization of the ocean, focus on your breath, whatever the anchor point you choose to be. You're not learning like religious doctrines or anything like that. And
it's a range. Like I've heard of love and compassion being an anchor, right? Like focus on something you love. Like that could be your dog, or in my case,
or the loving kindness meditation where you're just saying phrases like first you give love kindness to yourself, and then it's to a close friend, and then it's to a neutral person, and then it's to a difficult person that you're having difficulty with. So as you're sending, even with the most difficult person, to see if you could still send love and kindness to them. So it's really cultivating that love. If you could love yourself, then you could love others, and then you're transferring all the merits to the world.
So I think it's useful to think of this as the scientific side of it, and then the artistic side of it. So, for example, I teach human development, and I'm also a parent. And I could know everything that there is to know about theory, and I could still be a lousy parent. So there's a scientific component, and there's an actually legitimate field of study called positive psychology. And And there's a lot of research in neuroscience and psychology that actually overlaps tremendously with this. But then it's a whole different thing to actually put it into practice into your life. And that's the art side of it. That is something that is much more personal. Mm-hmm. And the way that Dana practices, her practice may actually be slightly different from mine because she may have a different worldview, a different culture, right. Slightly different values or priorities. So that's the component where you have a lot of freedom, but is the practice the side that is much more personal and that allows for a lot of diversity.
Right.
Academically, we do have certain standards for, both research and practice. But more and more, this is becoming part of a mainstream set of practices that are being used for clinical therapy, also for training of professionals, nurses, dental hygienists. UCLA trains their doctors, UMass trains their doctors into incorporating all of these principles in actual medical practice.
Yeah, because the research have shown the mindfulness-based stress reduction, right, really help with patients' healing and stuff. And
this has really been interesting, and I hope our listeners have enjoyed it as much as we have.
Well, why don't we end with nuggets?
Let's end with our nuggets.
Yeah. What are some nuggets you would like to share with our listeners?
I think that to just give meditation a shot, try it 5 minutes per day. And also really, I've been talking about this quite a lot, is that if faculty and could implement it in their classroom, it's an easy thing to implement. It doesn't cost anything. You just start with your class with 3 minutes of mindfulness breathing. And even when students are running late, they will come in, quietly and stuff. Mm-hmm. So that is a very simple thing to implement. And I've attended a conference where they presented it, how it was very helpful for the classroom.
And maybe consider mindfulness as a quiet way to be kind to yourself. And I think you'll find that in turn, it's easier to be kinder to others, that you kind of spread that around.
So I like to use a quote. It takes time to become what we already are. And I think it's very, very important to tap onto that inner child and allow it to, give us guidance and wisdom in our lives.
Thank you so much, Fernando, Dana, and Deborah.
Our pleasure.
For talking with us today about mindfulness.
I'm super excited. Like, just the whole vibe. It's like, I feel ready to just go and practice. I'm so excited for it. I can't wait. So thank you so much for your time.
Well, that was a really nice chat with Deborah, Dana, and Fernando. Since that meeting, of course, COVID-19 has struck. The conference Dana was scheduled to attend went virtual, and she conducted one of her first online meditations. Also, GCC's meditation space went virtual, and faculty, staff, and students were invited to attend. They will continue the practice this fall. Thanks for tuning in. We're taking a turn in future podcasts and hope to be sharing campus chats with some of our colleagues. We hope you'll tune in and listen and take part in our virtual community.